Welcome to today's episode of Mercy Can't Stop Her. I am your host, Judith Kambia Obatusa, JMO. Continuing our self-care series, I'm thrilled to have you all with us today. In our previous episodes, we've explored various aspects of self-care, and today we have a very special guest who not only produces self-care products, but has an extraordinary personal journey to share. From her story, we'll see the terrible impact of abuse and the immense benefits of self-care. Now, let's get into it. Stephanie, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence on Mercy Can't Stop Her. It's such a privilege to have you come on this platform to share your story, to help other women who may be going through or who are in the trenches.
I appreciate the opportunity. I love the work that you're doing. It's so important.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, when you talk about it being important, I was just looking at your bio and looking at your experience of 17 years of very difficult relationship time and the impacts on your life. So I'm just going to dive into it. Tell us a little bit about the 17 years, how it started, all of that.
So I was 22 when I met him, and I was going through kind of a crisis of faith at the time and was very depressed and very lost. I had moved to a new state by myself, so I was very alone, away from my family. And so he very easily came in and swooped me up and, praises and you're so great and you're so smart and you're so wonderful, and made me feel really good about myself in a time that was very dark. And long story short, we moved in together, and that was when the abuse began. And he had gotten me into some debts. He was buying a house and buying furniture, and he said, "Hey, this furniture has no payments for 90 days. Can we put this in your name?" I didn't know that I was signing up for credit to go into debt for him. I just thought, we'll pay it off in 90 days and then he'll pay it. And I was very young and I didn't know what I was doing. So I was kind of a financial prisoner at that point because I had tens of thousands of dollars of debt that I knew that he wouldn't pay off if I left him, and I couldn't pay off myself. I felt like I couldn't pay those off myself. So I just had to make the best of the situation. And I think, there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of this abuse is normal. You're being too sensitive. I'm just very passionate. And I tried to make it make sense in my head. I tried to normalize the abuse in my head. But at the same time, I would wake up in the middle of the night and know that something was horribly wrong and feel like the prisoner that I was. And so there was that part of me that was trying to say, hey, something is going on here. This isn't right. And you're not happy. But I didn't feel like I could leave. And so I just tried to make the best of it. And time went on, and we moved back to Utah where I grew up so I could be closer to my family. And by that time, I'd been with him for a number of years, and I was like committed. I was just like, hey, this is it. And he said we were soulmates and we were family. So then there was, of course, more debt that I went into and more financial entanglements and starting a business. And I bought a home up in Utah, and he started to tear the house apart in the name of we're going to renovate. And we're going to move the kitchen into the living room, and we're going to take out this wall and make it a loft, and we're going to do this and this. And finally, there was no single room that was not missing a wall or something. And there were live electrical wires dangling from the ceiling and nails sticking up from the floor. And it was total chaos. And it was all something that happened very little at a time. I would come home and another wall would be torn out, and I'd come home and another wall would be torn out. And again, I had to just make the best of the situation and try to believe that he was doing it with good intentions and he was doing it with the intent of fixing it up. Well, a decade passed and the house was still torn apart. And at this time, the business that I was running was really doing well. This was about 2013, 2014. We were doing really well. And he convinced me to buy an investment property, a second home, about 350 miles away. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to overextend myself financially. But when he wanted something, he was relentless and would come at me with every direction of, guilt and until he found my weak spot. And because of that relentlessness, I gave in. I bought this other house. And of course, all of the deals that we made in order for that to happen, like, hey, we're going to sell this car in order to do this. We're going to sell this car. And, I'm going to work so hard. He promised to work so hard to help pay for the house. And it was supposed to just be a vacation home that we shared with his mom, who was getting older. So we were supposed to share those expenses. Then all of a sudden he decided, no, my stepfather's in a wheelchair. He's going to ruin the house, so she can't move in. So now I have all of the expenses of this second house all in my name because he had ruined his credit. And then he promptly moved into this other house and started tearing it apart. And he started building things on common area land and moving fences and tearing up the yard and made a whole legal hassle with the HOA. And because he had started building things on the HOA land. So now I'm legally in trouble with the HOA. And he has no responsibility with this legally. And yet he wants all of the legal benefits and to be seen as an owner on the house. And even though legally he wasn't. And so, yeah, it was a mess. He had also torn up 3 commercial buildings that were leased in my name. He was saying, okay, we're going to expand the business and I'm going to work really hard to come out with new products and really push. So we need these new buildings and we need to build them out. And so he tore up these 3 commercial buildings that were leased in my name. So by the time 2015 came along, I was in an immense amount of stress because I could see that the business was peaking, as businesses do. There's normal cycles to business. And I could see that I was in a huge hole and he was not helping me. He was not taking responsibility. I was suicidal at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, because I did not see a way out of this. I did not understand still, even at that point, that I was being abused. I just thought he's having a midlife crisis and there's just going to be this one thing that will finally make him happy and finally make him be there for me and turn him around. I kept thinking he's having a midlife crisis, but the midlife crisis went on for 10 years. And so it was always chasing that one thing. Oh, I just need this one thing. I need this Porsche. I need this house. I need this motorcycle in order to be happy. And then I would cave and I'd let him get that thing. And then it didn't ever make him happy. Finally, I learned about narcissistic abuse, about emotional abuse when I was in that very, very dark period, starting to realize and comprehend that I was being abused and that I had to get out. And that was a huge undertaking because I had 2 torn apart houses and 3 commercial buildings that were torn apart.
3 commercial buildings, 2 houses. Did he have a
Mm.
mental health situation? Was he an addict to any
He was
substance?
not an addict. He was completely sober. He would not have a drink of alcohol, no drugs. He was very much against any kind of medication or any substances. But I believe it was narcissistic personality disorder, where he's always chasing a big thing. He needs that recognition and he needs kind of that emotional juice just to survive. So it made him very unstable. I think that's the best explanation. I'm not a therapist. I can't diagnose somebody, but learning as much as I've learned about narcissistic personality disorder and that experience, I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. So 2015, 2016, I was really questioning myself a lot because I had been gaslighted for so long. And my reality had been always questioned and my memory had always been questioned. And so it was really difficult to trust myself and to trust my experience at that point. And I just had to take a deep dive into it and really learn about it and really make a decision that I need to leave, and it's going to be really hard and there's going to be challenges. And it took me a couple of years after that to finally break it off with him. And so in 2018, I broke up with him, and it makes me look so weak and I'm so embarrassed, but my survival had been to keep him happy for so long that it was very difficult to make him mad by breaking up with him. So I broke up with him, yet he still had my debit card and he was still spending my money for several months and still living in the other house. Finally, once I kicked him out of the house, I got the courage to do that and I cut him off financially, and then he sued me because he saw our relationship as a marriage, and even though he never legally would take any of that responsibility, he wanted all the benefits of the marriage. And he basically sued me for half of everything that I had, even though he had taken so much and had ruined so much. So I had to go through a lawsuit with him, and finally we settled, and I'm done paying him off, and we're all done with that chapter in our lives. But it was a huge hole to get out of, and I had to sell the investment property. I had to just do a quick sale on it, sold it for what I bought it for, and then I was able to fix up the commercial buildings little by little with the help of, one of my employees, who's now my boyfriend, and with the help of my employees and with the help of a contractor who really helped me out, I was able to get out of these buildings and get out the leases of the buildings that I didn't need. And then also my new boyfriend fixed up my house. So I have walls again. I don't take walls for granted anymore.
Wow.
Like having living room with a TV and a couch was a big ask because my life had just been so chaotic that just having a living room with a TV and a couch was a big goal of mine.
Oh.
And so that's kind of the journey of that.
It's a very long, tumultuous journey. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that someone would continually tear down walls in every house. Kept getting you into financial. I had an episode of Mexican Supper where somebody talked about financial abuse, but this one is new. It's another level of financial abuse. So making you purchase things you don't need for him to destroy. And the thing about this abuse of a thing is how we become so gullible. Because after you leave the situation, you're like, what was wrong with my brain? Why will I say yes to this? And it's in every situation. I think that abuse, domestic violence, is the deepest form of betrayal. Because you've trusted them. And then by reason of trusting them, they take advantage of you. I think it's the worst form of betrayal. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sad. I don't know if I can say thank the Lord that you didn't have a child with that kind of person.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you
Absolutely.
imagine what we'll be going through now if you had a child? And I don't understand. You had to pay him off. Did he not own half of the debt too?
No, the debts were all in my name.
So the debt in your name while
Mm-hmm.
you were married, he's not part of it. But whatever you owned, he's part of it. Is that the law?
We were not married,
Yeah, but you're a common
and
law.
we were in the state of Utah. There is no common law where it's like, okay, if you've lived together for a certain number of years, you're automatically married. You have to file paperwork within a year and say we were common law and prove that you had rings, that you held yourself out to be a couple. So even though he saw it as a common law marriage, the law was contrary to that. So we got a lot of his case dismissed. I didn't want to have to go through a whole case because I knew that even if I won money from him, it would be tooth pulling to get it out of him because he was that way of not paying his debts. And so I just settled because I didn't want to have to go through all of that lawsuit and that cost. And having to put all of our past employees as witnesses and friends and family and put them all through that. So it's just like, I'm just going to cut my losses here.
I think that was a wise thing. I want to ask you a question. You said you started seeing the pattern when you learned about narcissism. Tell us how you got there.
Yeah, somebody had just posted an article on Facebook and I happened to click on it. And when I read it, it was like someone had ripped my soul from my body because it was like, oh my gosh, this explains everything in my life. And it was, yeah, it was very eye-opening. And I tried to push it down. I tried to say, no, you're just making things up because it was a very difficult realization to come to.
So nobody told you, it just showed up. But it was at a point in your life when you wanted more for your life. I think you said you were suicidal, you were asking why you were in this mess, you were having these conversations with yourself, and this just came up on Facebook. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. I was thinking there has to be more to life than this because I'm all I do is work ever, and I don't have friends, and I am not happy, and it just happened to come up at just the right time.
Apart from the debts, what else was it about the relationship that made you unhappy, that you would call abuse?
Well, the conflict, all the arguing, and it was basically a sexless relationship. Always kept me on my toes and made me feel bad about myself, would withhold from me. And then all of a sudden, oh, I'm in a good mood because you bought me a Corvette. And then I was rewarded with sex. And then, so it was just another tool for manipulation that he used, and he used to tear me down. No, I don't want to have sex with you because you have too much cellulite. I was a size 00 petite. I was 95 pounds and I was still too fat for him. And, oh, well, you're not toned enough. You might be thin, but you're not toned enough. And so there was all of this critique about my body and my appearance.
Wow.
And that really messed with my head because at the same time, he was saying, I love you, I love you, I love you 10 times a day. And we're soulmates and we're meant to be together. Yet he's so repulsed by me that he won't make love to me. And so it really tore me down mentally.
Wow. You went through something. Tell us about where you are now. You said something. You're a first-time mom of 42, and the miracle of that baby is just so wonderful. I want you to tell us how you met this person. You said the person that's now your boyfriend. I think that's the father of the baby.
Yes.
So tell us about how you were able to love again, to let love into your life and led to this amazing miracle.
Yeah. So he was my employee, and he was 6.5 years younger than me. So I didn't really give it much thought. I thought, oh, we're too different. He's too young for me. He's my employee. But we were really good friends, and we had worked together for 3 to 4 years and become friends. And he helped me fix one of the buildings. And so we spent a lot of time together. And then as soon as I broke up with the ex, we hung out a couple of times, and I thought, I'm not going to let anything happen here. We're just hanging out as friends. And I was leaving his house one night, and my car had just been hit. It was parked on the street, and my car had just been hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going through this breakup and all this craziness in my life, and now my car just has been hit. So he gave me a hug, and that was kind of the start of it. Was he gave me this hug to console me. You know, we called the ambulances and everybody to take care of the car situation. And then I kept going back to him for hugs. And then we found ourselves sitting on the side of the street with our arms around each other. And we're going, oh my gosh, what is happening here? This is very new and exciting. And ever since then, we basically were together. We just get along really well. We work together very well as a team. So going back to the baby that we have now, I did not think I would ever have children. I have been diagnosed with adenomyosis and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And all through my relationship with the abusive relationship with my ex, my periods were very, very irregular. But the second that I left him, my periods regulated. I did not have any missed periods anymore. And my PMS symptoms disappeared. And all of the pain and all of the very extreme symptoms that I had experienced disappeared as soon as I got out of that relationship. And so I was 39 when I broke up with the ex. And about a year later, when I was 40, I got a blood test, and they said, you know, you have PCOS according to this blood test. If you want kids because of your age, just go straight to IVF. You know, you basically don't really have any chances to conceive naturally. And even with IVF, you only have a 20% chance of having a baby. So, okay, I've already grieved this as a loss in my life. It was something that I was grappling with, and I made peace with the fact that I wouldn't be a mom. And then a year later, my period was one day late, and I happened to have a pregnancy test sitting in my cupboard. And so I thought, oh, just for kicks, I'll take it. And it came back positive. And now I have a baby, and it was really miraculous to become pregnant, even though I had been told that I would not be able to do that. And it really made me realize how much trauma affects our bodies and affects our hormones as women. And it can have a deep impact on our health when we are being abused. And a lot of the time we think of mental health as being separate from physical health, but it is very, very connected. And that's something that I'm trying to spread the word about with my podcast.
That is very interesting. The issue of how trauma affects our hormones and our bodies as women. I stumbled on a book as God opened the door for me to start getting information that will help me. I think you may know the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And every time I hear things like how trauma affects our bodies, it's just under that. We're doing a series on self-care on this podcast. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because that's what your podcast is actually focusing on. You have used yourself as a test, a specimen, and other people you might have met to be able to say that these are the things that trauma causes in our lives, and this is how we can combat them. Could you please tell us a little about that? I'm definitely going to put a link to your podcast in the show notes because I believe that there are many women in abusive situations who have not been able to leave for one reason or the other. But while they are there, they can take care of themselves. They can prepare themselves for a time when their lives won't have the stress that they live in right now. And the only way to do that is by the knowledge and by applying that knowledge. Actually, it is the knowledge that we apply that makes a difference in our lives. So even though you're in stress now, if you're listening to us, it's not forever. As you apply the knowledge that you receive, like Stephanie applied the knowledge she received about narcissism. And today she's a free woman in another relationship, a happy relationship with a child that she was told by experts that she would never have naturally. She did have. So tell us a little bit, Stephanie, about how trauma affects us and how we can surmount the challenges that come up from trauma in our bodies as women.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There are a lot of health effects that trauma can cause, whether it's ongoing trauma as adults or as children. Childhood trauma can show up in our bodies when we turn 50, where all of a sudden your immune system starts attacking your body in certain ways, like through psoriasis or MS or other autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's. And also with our hormones, specifically with polycystic ovarian syndrome, our hormone system is controlled by the brain. And the hypothalamus is what controls our hormones. And it's been found that in women with PCOS, we have a hyperactive hypothalamus. And the signaling that the hypothalamus is sending to the pituitary is hyperactive. So that means that we continually create luteinizing hormone. Instead of having an LH surge that makes us ovulate, we have a continual supply of high LH that causes follicles in the ovary to mature. Well, when you have all of these follicles in the ovary maturing, instead of just one and then it's released, causing ovulation, you have all of these cysts that are being formed on your ovary. And then those cysts create androgens, male hormones in the body. And then without getting too technical about it, those androgens help increase our insulin. And then we become insulin resistant. But also insulin resistance is a symptom of trauma. When we go through trauma, our cortisol response, also through the hypothalamus largely, is our body's cortisol says to our body cells, hey, I need your glucose. We're going to need to run or fight when we go through a stressor, when we experience a stressor. And so if we're chronically experiencing stress, as we do in a trauma, in an abusive relationship or a childhood, your cells learn that, no, we can't absorb glucose. We need to keep it in the bloodstream because we might need to run or fight. So we lose our insulin receptors on our cells and become insulin resistant. And with PCOS, it's been found that emotional abuse is more linked to PCOS than physical abuse.
Wow.
And if you think about with physical abuse, you actually end up using that glucose. You fight back or you have to run. You have to actually do something with your body to survive in physical abuse. But in emotional abuse, you have that rise in glucose in your bloodstream and it has nowhere to go. You're not running, you're not fighting. And so then your glucose, instead of being absorbed by your cells and used for energy, goes straight to your liver and then stored as fat. And many women will be insulin resistant and gain weight. And the weight gain is blamed for the health problems when really it was that initial trauma that caused you to be insulin resistant. The weight gain, that's just a symptom of the trauma.
Wow. Oh, my. Look, if you're listening to this episode of the podcast, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to Life Detox, the Life Detox podcast. Because I'm always talking about, see, The most common form of abuse is emotional, yet is the one no one can see. It's the one that people say, he doesn't beat you, so you shouldn't, you can manage it, But look at it. This is an example of how those things affect us so deeply. There's so many other ways that abuse affects us, but this is one major way. So people start to deal with diabetes. Diabetes could lead into other things, high blood pressure, heart problems, heart attack, dying before their time. Some people go into substance abuse. So it's an important thing. So in your case, what did you do in terms of self-care that made a difference?
Oh, it's time. Time has helped a lot since getting out. But also, one thing that I've found if I'm struggling, and I got this tip from Susan Anderson, her book, Taming Your Outer Child, is to make a small promise to yourself, very small promise, very specific small promise to yourself, and keep it. And that helps you feel taken care of. And for me, it was just taking my vitamins. Okay, I'm going to make sure that every morning I take all of my supplements that I need to. And that really makes such a difference for me mentally. And it can't be like something broad, like, oh, I'm going to do better with my diet. That's too non-specific. It needs to be a very specific promise to yourself of, I'm going to make that phone call tomorrow, or I'm going to send that email tomorrow, or something that you need to do that's just very, very small, that is not a challenge to do. And so sometimes we think of taking bubble baths or, going for long walks as self-care, and they can be, but sometimes something that's just really, really simple, like changing a light bulb, so that it's not on your mind anymore. Something very small that you can promise to yourself and then keep that promise so that your inner child will start to trust you again. And whether you believe there's an inner child or whether it's a part of your brain, they will start to trust you again and you can start to relax.
Wow. So come back again to the issue of trust. So you gave someone your trust, they broke the trust. Now you don't trust yourself anymore, because how could you have given someone else your trust? And because you don't trust yourself anymore, you now don't keep promises to yourself. And then the cycle is just unending. Thanks so much, Stephanie, for sharing yourself with us. These are very intimate stories, and they are also hard stories to tell. And that you would willingly come to this platform and be vulnerable in this way. It takes courage, and I just want to appreciate you for it. I would like to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so right now I'm producing my podcast, The Life Detox, and I'm also rebuilding my business, Bubble and Be Organic. We sell organic bath and body products. Part of my hormone journey with the polycystic ovarian syndrome was starting my company and creating products without harmful chemicals in them, xenoestrogens, all of those chemicals that can throw off our hormones. So I'm really trying to rebuild that business because I kind of had to take a few years off to get my life in order. And so I'm building that, working, taking care of my toddler, and thinking about getting a master's degree, preparing for that, studying, and thinking about writing a book or two. I just have so much creative energy now that I can discover who I am and what my passions are. And I have that freedom now. And I just want women to know, and people, anyone who is in an abusive relationship, that getting out is so hard. But I want you to know that it is worth it. And all of the challenges that you will face in getting out are so, so difficult. But it's so worth it. And I hope that you can use the information that I've shared today about how trauma can affect our health to use that as motivation to get out and know that getting out is a form of self-care. And I have seen people who have been in longer term abusive relationships than I, and the health consequences are dire, even if it's not physical abuse. I always say emotional abuse is physical abuse because it affects us physically.
Wow. I agree with you because it affects us physically. I'm going to put a link to Bubble
and B.com.
So you can order some of those products to help your health, to help you online. So you can order them from anywhere and they'll be shipped to you. That's supporting the work that Stephanie does and also supporting yourself because that's part of your self-care. I truly believe that if we begin to think of how valuable we are and know that we deserve care, no matter the little ways that we can. For example, go on the Bubble and Be website, order some things for yourself and use them to take care of you, to take a moment in the bathroom and just spend time with yourself because you deserve it. No matter where you are, whether you're in an abusive relationship or you're out of an abusive relationship, as long as you realize that you are valuable. Even if you're hearing how you're not fine, how you have cellulite, how you're too slim, too fat, too short, too whatever, just know that you are valuable. And the thing somebody is telling you is not because something is wrong with you. So there's something wrong with someone who promises you love and gives you pain. There's something absolutely, totally, completely wrong with that person. So don't ever think that's because you are bad or because you deserve it. Nobody deserves it. I feel that every man who does that is cursed. You must be living under a curse to take something so beautiful, because if you were so bad, the man wouldn't have brought you into his life. You were so beautiful that then when you got into his hands, you became that terrible, too much cellulite. But before he couldn't keep his hands off you, now you have too much cellulite, you're too slim, you're too fat. So go to that website, get yourself a product or two, take good care of yourself. I always ask for one for the road. So speak to that woman directly who is in pain right now.
So if you are feeling hopeless, know that there is hope and you can change, and you may feel like you're in a prison and you may feel like the odds of surviving and getting out are insurmountable, but it is possible. It is hard, but it is possible, and it is worth it. And there is hope, and you will find yourself again. And you can start by just listening to yourself and taking time, even if it's just a couple of minutes, to experience your body. Just sit there and be present. And like you said, know that you are worth it, and know that you are worthy, and you are not all of those terrible things that you've been told that you are. And those things were told to you not because they were true, but because they were being used to control you. So they are not true. And I hope that you can find a piece of yourself that is left over from before the abuse and hold on to it and know that that part of you can grow and flourish and turn into something that you couldn't even imagine. Your life can be something beautiful.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really, really appreciate the time you spent with us. And you want to write books, all your creative juices are flowing abundantly now. And I'm here for it. I'm here to promote your book. I'm here to promote everything you're doing. So I'm going to put a link to the podcast because I think the Life Detox is something we all need. If you've been in an abusive relationship, that means you've got some toxins that have come into your life. And this is a moment that you need to take a moment or two and listen to that podcast episodes and use them to detoxify those toxic things that you have experienced, that you've lived, that you're even living in right now. So I'm going to put a link to the Life Detox. And I'm encouraging you to please, please, please go and subscribe to the Life Detox on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey with Stephanie Greenwood. I'm blown away by how her abuse impacted her fertility. And I wonder how many women are living with avoidable issues that they're undergoing various expensive and even invasive medical procedures for because they are in an abusive relationship. The story is quite inspiring and it's very big food for thought. If you want to continue this conversation, share your own experiences and connect with a community that values self-care and personal growth in an intimate and private setting, I'd like to invite you to join the Mercy Can't Stop Our Sisterhood on Facebook. Together, let's support and uplift one another on our journeys towards well-being and fulfillment, even in the trenches of life. When we do this, mercy can't stop us. Thank you so much for listening and see you next time.